Welcome to View from Left Field, where we analyze and discuss the weekly news. I'm your host, Will, and today we will be talking about anti-immigrant legislation as well as the H-1B visas and the discussion going on behind that, as well as Trump's call for Canada to become the 51st state of the U.S.
Oh, Canada.
And on our panel today is Jerry,
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year's. Happy 2025.
Jimmy,
Hello.
and Tex.
Hey, everybody.
So I hope everyone is having a good start, as good of a start as you can to the new year. Is everyone keeping up with their New Year's resolutions, or did you already fall off of that already? Trying to remember what is it within the first couple weeks, I think most
Yeah,
people fall off.
my New Year's resolution was to not make any New Year's resolutions, and I am definitely doing a great job of that.
It's a powerful
Nothing.
one.
Yes, right.
I'm
Incredible.
doing the same resolution I had last year, which is double down. It can mean whatever you want it to mean, but I am doubling down. So far so good.
No resolutions here, but maybe I should start thinking of some. Hey, y'all have inspired me.
Awesome. Glad we were able to do that. So, the last couple of weeks, there has been a lot of talk, and this is before Trump is even inaugurated into office. There's been this whole kind of blow up behind the H-1B visas that we've heard, and primarily it seems to be going on between Trump's base and Elon Musk. I guess those are kind of the two loudest voices that seem to be talking about it. But of course, we do know now, and I've seen a couple articles on it, that that Bernie Sanders did weigh in on it as well. I wanted to start off and read a couple blurbs that he had said on the issue. So this is from The Hill. And the headline reads, Sanders doubles down on attacks from Musk over H-1B visas. He calls them dead wrong. Senator Bernie Sanders is doubling down on his attacks against tech billionaire Elon Musk over H-1B visas, telling him he's, quote, dead wrong about the employment visa. In an op-ed published Wednesday on Fox News, Sanders highlighted the ongoing debate about H-1B visas and other guest worker programs as President-elect Trump prepares to implement his immigration plan. Some say the visa attracts professional talent to the U.S., and others say the program allows employers to hire from outside the country and pay workers less than they would if they hired an American citizen. Musk, who was tapped to co-lead Trump's, quote, Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, has defended the visa program, arguing companies can hire workers that they need and can't find domestically. Musk's social platform X lashed out against opponents in the debate, and Trump came out in support of the program. So, what do we think on this, on the H-1B visas? I mean, I think Sanders definitely brings up a good point with, and this is not a new issue, I think, especially when we're talking about immigrant labor. There is a long history of super exploitation against immigrant workers. I know the H-1B visa may be a little different because they're coming here to do some kind of skilled work, but he does bring up a good point where we're bringing immigrants to do work, and a lot of these companies are probably doing it so they can pay them less. They don't have to give them maybe full benefits. They can treat them harsher because it's like, look, you came here on a visa. I mean, in the company's aspect, they probably say, well, we don't have to treat you great, because what are they going to do? Because a lot of the immigrants do not have, unfortunately, the same level of protections or the same recourse that, maybe American citizens do. And so I
A
think
lot
that,
of companies, right, can just use the H-1B visa as a bargaining chip with that particular employee.
Yep.
Like, oh, It's really hard to go through all this visa process because it's a mess.
It's an employer-sponsored visa.
Right, right. So you have to get the employer's permission to do it, and then you're suddenly pitting yourself against the other workers that might be trying to get that as well. And it can I've seen it where they do use it as like a bargaining chip to say, well, maybe if you do a little bit more, this visa will just manifest itself. It's
It's interesting the divide that we're seeing between the kind of rank and file Republican voters who were brought into the fold of the party by, promises of the party leadership ginning up race hatred and saying we're going to be American first and we hate anyone who's not from this country. And then now they have Elon Musk being one of the people that's right in the fold, calling the shots. President Musk, as some people have taken to calling him, he's saying, no, actually, we hate American workers, and we don't want American workers to have these skilled jobs
right.
because we can exploit those immigrant workers more effectively.
Right.
It's like both sides have their a hint of truth, and then as like mostly the program is not. It's kind of like, I think, I don't know if this is exactly what Elon Musk has been saying, but we're bringing the Einsteins of the world to like work on his spaceships or something like that. And like America does have a rich history of having Einstein come over and help us make the nuclear bomb, like
Literally
things like that.
Einstein.
Yeah, and so there is some truth to that, but I have also heard that that's not exactly how this program works. That it is like, I mean, it's not also like backbreaking labor. It's not like we're throwing them into the strawberry fields like we do our illegal immigrant labor force, but it's still like just like a male. It's like really menial, like white collar jobs. Yeah, maybe those should go to American workers, or American workers should have a crack at that as well. And that's kind of the truth that is in the mega's perspective, is like, hey, like, if while things are so bad, why are we undercutting our own workforce? But also, like, these are not the greatest jobs either. So are we really gonna have to bend over backwards to defend this sort of stuff? So I'm not really on either side in this instance, but what I find the most fascinating is how it's not even inauguration day and there's already schisms forming under this administration.
I don't think Bernie Sanders is saying that this is like an America first, like MAGA movement to be against H-1B. I think that the whole immigration the American immigration process needs reform badly. It's just purposefully difficult.
Yep.
And because of that, it functions in the favor of the employers. And that is really what Elon Musk is trying to look for. Because remember Elon Musk's route, he came to America with, a book bag, a strong dedication to learn, and, a whole bunch of blood emeralds that he got from his father in South Africa and Zimbabwe. So he doesn't really come from that hard working. Yeah, well, he doesn't really come from like the impoverished, when we think of like the like the Americans from like the 1800s or early 20th century, all that. His intentions are to exploit, and I agree with Bernie on that.
Yeah, there was a really good quote from his op-ed where he said, "If there's truly a major shortage of skilled tech workers in this country, why did Tesla lay off over 7,500 American workers last year, including many software developers and engineers at its factory in Austin, Texas, while applying to hire thousands of H-1B guest workers?" And it's a pretty obvious answer. Musk is famous for talking about how he wants his workers sleeping on the factory floor. He wants them in the office 6 days a week. And you're not going to get American workers with protections who aren't threatened with deportation if they quit the job to get to exploit like that.
Yeah.
Right. And you bring up a good point because we have other bills that are going through even the House right now. When we're talking about kind of just anti-immigrant sentiment in this country, aside from the H-1B visa thing, we also have the U.S. House is pushing through legislation that would allow the country to deport undocumented immigrants if they are even charged with minor crimes, kind of thing. And this was from the Texas Tribune, and they had written an article. So it says the U.S. House of Representatives passed legislation on Tuesday targeting undocumented immigrants for deportation if they are charged with nonviolent crimes such as shoplifting. It says the Laken-Riley Act passed 264 to 159 votes with, this is the funny part, so it says with 48 Democrats joining Republicans. So again, the Democrats always talk this big game about we're not the Republicans. We are, we're better than them. We're pro-worker. We're not Trump. We're not like Trump, But then they always are joining hands bipartisanly on issues like this.
The worst issues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the worst
Yeah.
issues that make the lives of Americans worse objectively, and they always seem to line up on things of that nature.
There's a reason why that's called the Lincoln-Riley Act, is because Lincoln Riley, I believe, was a student maybe, but she was jogging at the University of Georgia and happened to be murdered by a illegal immigrant. Let alone, the rate that immigrants commit crimes is much lower than American citizens, or and actual undocumented immigrants. I think if you're an undocumented immigrant, you wouldn't want to give any obvious indicators that you were doing anything unlawful. And so the whole thing is racist, because that's why it's named that. And to see that Democrats will concede that and go towards the Republicans on it is just, they're feckless. That's no surprise. They do this with anything that is crime related. It does become very, it's a racist tendency that I see.
Yeah, the machines are being spun up for the mass deportations that Trump is promising. I've been saying it, I'm going to keep saying it. He wants concentration camps for undocumented immigrants, and they're coming.
Would like more of them? Like how much? I'm anticipating things are not going to be bad, but the first hurdle that it needs, or the first benchmark or milestone, is going to be, when does he become worse than Obama was?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
As far as deportations, I think I forget what because the term changes depending on if it's a Republican or a Democrat in power. What
Talking
it
about
was
deporter in chief.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Like
like detention
yeah, so that was
facilities.
detention facilities under Democrats, and then when Trump got inaugurated, we started calling them more what they were, which was like child prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And then Biden got into power, and now it's like
Concentration
it's too
camps, I've heard.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not good. They're really bad. But it's like, talk about bad issues with bipartisan support.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. That is, we've mentioned this before. Immigration was just not that big of an issue 20 plus years ago as it is today. And it just seems that this is the route that it's going, though. Whether or not who deports more, Democratic presidents or Republican presidents, we see the trajectory in just the laws that are being created, and just the daily social norms of, well, now you have to walk on eggshells when you're talking about immigration. That was not a thing like in the 90s, that to the extent that it is today.
Yeah, and we continue to see those Democratic lawmakers cozying up to these policies, like with this bill and Representative Henry Cuellar of Laredo, Texas. And John Fetterman is now going to be going down to Mar-a-Lago. All these people who are ostensibly Democrats are shifting further and further right.
Yeah, and going off of the point that Jerry brought up, this not being an issue, there was an article back in 1987 from Labor Today. And because there was another bill at that point that was being brought in to demonize undocumented workers. And it's reading that article from 1987 and looking at, the issues that we're facing now, it's the issue hasn't changed as far as our analysis, I think, because I think we all understand that it is the ruling class trying to split the working class, trying to pit the white workers against the Mexican workers or the undocumented workers. It's just pitting those two groups against each other, so that way they are weaker and they're not united. But there are some really good tidbits in this article, and it's called "Hope or Harassment" from Labor Today. And I'm just going to read a couple snippets of this. They interviewed at one point this woman who was an organizer for the ACTWU. If anyone knows what that union acronym is, I am not familiar with that. But her name was Lydia Bracamonte. Excuse me if I butchered that.
It's the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union.
Oh, okay. Which I don't think
Gotta
they're
be.
around anymore, are they? Are they
No,
still?
but
Yeah.
they had the jingle, which is why I'm interjecting so vehemently. The look for the union label. Da, 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 da. Everybody needs to look that up on YouTube if they haven't already.
That's a good intro song.
Just, it's just perfect.
Awesome. So in this article, she was interviewed, or she gave some tidbits. So she starts off talking about, she says, what's to stop employers from asking for citizenship verification selectively when there's a strike going on, for example, or an organizing drive? It also opens doors for increased racial and ethnic discrimination against both aliens and American citizens. Employers and landlords who think someone, quote, looks foreign or speaks with an accent may begin asking for documents, or worse, turn people away from a job or an apartment. All people of color, all people who speak English as a second language, whether documented or not, may face increased harassment and difficulties finding a job or a place to live. And there was another quote in here that Jerry had pointed out. It was a notable quote. It's kind of in the bottom of the article. It says, what is wanted is for every union to help inculcate the grand ennobling idea that the interests of labor are one, that there should be no distinction of race or nationality, no classification of Jew or Gentile, Christian or infidel, that there is one dividing line, that which separates mankind into two great classes, the class that labors and the class that lives by others' labor. And that, again, back to that point of a lot of these immigration bills are used to, divide the working class. And I see that kind of thing on a daily basis, working in the construction trades, because and I think this is the thing kind of around the country, but many of the in our industry, or at least where I live, a lot of the drywallers are, Hispanic. And I don't hear it all the time, but there is definitely sentiment that you can hear on the job site of people looking down on drywallers because, and they don't say, because they are immigrants. They don't ever say that. It's always the tone that they use when they
Right.
talk about them.
Like the dog
Mhm.
whistle.
Yeah, it's always, oh, those dang drywallers or something, or they, it's yeah, it's just the way that they talk about them when they're not around. They act like they are a lesser trade than like the tinners or electricians.
Right. It's like when your grandma talks about, in the inner city, the kids in the inner city, it
Yeah.
actually means something racist.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
Tex, weigh in on this because I lived in Texas for a little while, and it was easy to drive by your local Home Depot and see a bunch of ready and willing.
Day laborers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's it like from your time in Texas?
Honestly, it's like I'm in an area that's very techy. There's a lot of corporate headquarters out here. So we have a lot of skilled laborers like H-1B visa recipients, especially software engineers, product managers. I see a lot of that. And then when you go down into the more rural areas, yeah, you see a lot more day laborers, undocumented immigrants who are looking for any job that they can get by the day. So yeah, I definitely see both.
Yeah. A- And one of the biggest or one of the most major points that I've heard about this is like how much of an economic crisis a mass deportation
Right.
um, campaign is actually going to provide. I mentioned strawberry fields earlier, and
Are
that's
you going to
from
break out
one
in
of my
song again?
no.
Oh,
I considered it, but that's from
you need
a
to double
joke that
down. Come on, the
I
New Year's
I'm not
resolution.
I'm that's that's not where I'm going with this, but I appreciate the sentiment. It was the joke that Chappelle made on SNL in 2016, where people were like, "What's going to happen to all these Mexican workers?" And he's like, "Come on, it's not like we're all going to start picking our own strawberries." He's like, is it really gonna are I don't think it's gonna happen as much as I think the economic mechanisms that necessitate undocumented labor is stronger than the racist xenophobia that is pushing this. Well, time will tell. Maybe Trump is definitely trying to double down for his New Year's resolution. So we'll just have to see. But those are two very strong conflicting forces that we just have to wait and see how they play out.
I think that's the heart of the issue. The difference between the, like I was saying earlier, the core of the party who actually votes for them and what they've been propagandized to why they want to vote for them, and then the mechanisms inside the party that actually have an understanding of the economy and what needs to be done to keep profits going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point with, how essential they are to keeping this country running, honestly. I mean, the amount of work that they do in all of the farming and agricultural jobs. I mean, if they got their fantasy of deporting all these people, I mean, the I, I couldn't even imagine the level of damage it would do to the economy. But that brings up a good point of, is it just smoke and mirrors so they can kind of, continue to super exploit these people, and keep kind of dangling and saying, well,
Yes.
remember, we can deport you at any time.
And to move, and maybe this is a good segue, but our neighbors to the north, I work in an industry where I work with Canadians, I work with people in Mexico, and I know the Canadians, there's already this feeling of distrust between Canadians and Americans, given what Trump has said. But it's been used, and this is coming from people in like the higher ups in or company that say, well, we don't know because of the political uncertainty of what Trump is. He said that we're the 51st state, which we can all agree is ridiculous. But they're in the tariffs. I don't know. We got to buckle up. We got to be tight, which is
Yeah.
a form of exploitation. Makes the workers feel much more uncertain.
I heard someone
Yeah.
online point out something really interesting about that when the empire of the United States is now finally turning back to say, we're kind of interested in getting more land, more resources. Instead of turning to our enemies like Cuba, they're turning to our being the state's enemies, Cuba. They're turning to the state's allies in Canada and Mexico, our trade partners. It's really strange strategy wise.
Yeah. Let me read a little bit of this article from The Hill. So the headline reads, says, "What to know about Trump's calls to make Canada the 51st state." Starts off and it says, "President-elect Trump has doubled down on his suggestion of a merged United States and Canada in the
They
wake of
said it. They
What?
said it. Double down. I'm sorry.
In the wake of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to resign, which I'll ask something in a minute about that. I'll circle back to that. Some have shrugged off Trump's suggestion Canada should become the 51st state as an old joke or mere posturing, while others dismiss it as a bad political idea given Canada's blue leanings. But Trump on Tuesday threatened, quote, economic force to annex the U.S.'s neighbor to the north. Together with talks of buying Greenland and controlling the Panama Canal, the comments suggest he's aiming to expand U.S. power after he takes office this month. The concept, though, continues to be largely unpopular among Canadians. I wonder why. And with Trudeau exiting the political stage, it's unclear what impact Trump's remarks will have on the U.S.-Canada relationship under new leaders. Let me just ask, because I'm not terribly familiar with Trudeau these days, but I mean, the last few years, he has become very unpopular, has he not?
Yeah.
I mean, I assume that's why he's resigning, just because he is that unpopular. But yeah, I just have not seen a lot of good news coming out of Canada.
I think of what happened at the end of last year with, how we had a railroad strike in this country, they had a railroad strike, and the way he handled that, it was like he made everyone unhappy with
Mhm.
it, and it was just a disaster after another one. But
I think another contributing factor is the housing crisis in Canada as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. That does seem to be an issue that I keep hearing about, is kind of their like social network seems to be uh just fizzling away. And that was something that for decades Americans always talked about. They go, well, they've got good health care, they've got this or they've got that. And it always was kind of the envy of Americans, because they would always go, well, I'll move to Canada because they have XYZ. And it seems like even those few things that they had, going for Canada seems to be kind of being taken away or rolling back little by little.
Mm-hmm.
but they had to deal with French Canadians, so
Sure.
Yeah.
nothing.
It seems to be just like economic issues. I'm just glancing at an article from CNN. They do mention a viral confrontation with a steel worker in Trudeau. But I mean, that sounds pretty similar to what's happening in America, is like economic issues are taking center stage because it's just been that bad. So enough to where he's resigning.
It feels almost like absurd that we're even getting articles now that are seriously weighing the economic benefits of annexing Canada. It's certainly not something I ever thought I would see.
It's because it's hard to take anything Trump says seriously, but we definitely have to look at it as yes, there is a fascist tendency with his rhetoric, and I think, well, if you just let the fascists get away with things, at least their rhetoric, you see what happens. I mean, Weimar Germany, see what happens there. And that gets kind of, yeah, that needs to be articulated better because it's something that we can't ignore. But on the surface, what is the goal for Trump to be doing this? What is it to be attacking Trudeau? Does it make him look better for his base? Because he does have a very strong base that needs to be fed the constant vitriol that he does feed them, it seems.
Right.
I think the easy
Yeah.
answer is, and what I think a lot of liberal media will probably say is, it's about legacy for him. He's interested in having some sort of claim that can go on forever after he's not president or whatever. But realistically, I think there's probably some economic factor or something more than that. I don't think that, even how genuinely stupid I think that that man is, I don't think that the people around him would be letting him say things that stupid unless they had some kind of motive to do so.
I
Yeah.
I've heard that as well about how it's Trump's the narcissism can be a mixed bag. Or I've even heard how a lot of the reasons why, well, like during his first term, this is an example of, like, he wants to be considered, he wants to be loved, like, he wants people to like him, and he wants to be considered a good president, or at least, like, the president who did that one thing that everybody's going to remember. That, I mean, that can go, that could be go one of two ways. During his first term, when he met with Kim Jong Un, like, even if you think that was he was coddling a dictator, or like that's what a lot of liberals say about it, in that moment where it was presenting the possibility of a reunification of the Koreas, like something that goes beyond my own parents' generation, and that
Yep.
Trump could be the one to start something like that. Obviously, it didn't work out. Things have gotten much worse with North Korea, but I think that sort of perception of Trump as that guy who almost did that thing that's going to have consequences for hundreds of years is exactly what he wants to be perceived as.
Yeah, a new
Sure.
Ronald Reagan, like that kind of
Yeah.
cultic following.
I could see that being why, leading up to the election, I had seen Trump being hailed as like the peace candidate.
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
he is willing to grab onto any popular sentiment to, like you said, so he can be that guy that did the one thing that 50 years later we'll still be talking about him. And so that's why you heard things like, oh, he's the anti-war candidate, or he's the pro-worker candidate, and he would get, he would pay tribute to labor by having like one pro-union person, or
Yep. Eliminate overtime tax is one of
yep.
the promises that I had coworkers who were excited about that,
Yep.
but don't count on it.
He's kind of like, he kind of fits into whatever the beholder wants to see.
Correct. Right.
Whatever they want from him, he's like, yeah, I'm that.
Yep. Yeah.
Schrodinger's Trump. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and it's not just Canada. Like I think Tex brought up, it's the Panama Canal. It's Greenland.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, what is this strategy? Is it just who? Can we take this seriously? Am I just being kind of gaslit myself by Trump? Like it's
Or is it a distraction so he can do
Right.
whatever he wants at home?
Right. Yep. Circle back to Canada. I wanted to read just a quick portion of this article. This was from Leslie Morris. Jerry, you have any idea what year this was from? I don't remember. I don't see one in the article.
would like to say the 80s, but
Could be. So
Let's see
this
if I can-
was, and she was, correct me if I'm wrong, she was in the Communist Party of Canada. I believe. But she had written an article. It's just called Canada and the U.S. And there was just a little section that I thought really brought up something that we don't hear a lot about, or that is not discussed, is this idea of Canada basically being what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of dictated by U.S. monopoly interests. And so she, in this article, she says, so she talks about nationalization at one point, but she says, the word nationalization is being heard with greater frequency. It will become a central demand of the masses of Canadians as the economic situation deteriorates and the structural crisis of the Canadian economy, its malformation due to U.S. imperialist pressure, and the sellout of Canada to the U.S. by Canadian monopoly capitalists, known as, quote, integration with the U.S. economy, cripples industry after industry. And it must be borne in mind that this, quote, special characteristic of Canada, its dependence on the USA, is superimposed on the classical features, cyclical crisis, automation, changes in the structure of the working class in the shape of a declining number of production as against non-production workers. She used quotes, overproduction, and the effects of the military budget on the economy, increasing taxation, crisis in the municipalities due to the antiquated property basis of taxation, and the increasing demand for municipal services. In short, all the concomitants, sorry, she uses a weird word there, of a
Wow.
developed
Canadians.
yeah, of
Yeah.
a developed capitalist country in the conditions of the all-pervading general crisis of capitalism. I thought she brought up a really good point on, like, you know, I mean, the only company I can think of that I know of, I mean, I know there's been railroad companies that have amalgamated, from Canada and the US, but, what other industries are we seeing, as Canada seems to be heading towards that crisis, or maybe they're in that crisis right now, but what other industries are we kind of seeing that is laying the groundwork for this idea of, the US takeover, of the Canadian economy? That was something that kind of came to mind.
I'm sure
To
the
me as well.
for-profit healthcare sector is just licking their lips looking at Canada's
yeah.
healthcare system.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
That article is very interesting, and
Yep.
I should definitely correct myself. I have nothing. I have nothing against the French Canadians. In fact, the history of the French province, like Quebec, she goes into that. It's very. I was fascinated with it. Like Quebec was ruled by basically a neo-fascist for like 2 decades, and it was really the working class of Quebec that kind of overthrew it. If you learn the history, like especially like in the Jewish working class history of Quebec, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
And maybe they should be the ones that should succeed. Maybe Canada is should like read about that. They talk about it. No, again, this was written I think in the 80s, but they talk about how the succession of French Canada is worth considering,
Yeah.
given its national identity of being French.
Right.
Don't want to throw that in the works, but I think it's worth reading that article. What's the name of it one more time?
It was Canada and the U.S. by Leslie Morris. So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, with that, anybody have any parting words on our topics of Canada, our neighbors to the north?
They use the metric system, right?
I think they do, which
Yes.
we could really benefit from.
Yeah, they'll never accept our annexation
Imperial
for that
system.
reason only. Be like,
Yeah.
we're never learning inches. It's too convoluted and confusing.
Right. They're like, it's like goes back to that joke where like Americans will use anything but the metric system. Like
Yeah.
like there was the meme, it's like, they'll measure like, oh, this thing weighs 3 horses or
3
like,
hamburgers.
yeah. Yeah. But I mean, Jimmy, I know you've you've done some work in the construction trades, but it's like, I mean, going over to the metric system would do wonders.
Can I tell you, because I literally was educated on this today, I'll take 30 seconds.
Yes,
When
please.
when people survey construction sites and they put stakes in the ground, there's markings that they put on it, which I'm not going to get into too much because I'm still learning it, but they mark feet and then decimals. And then there are rulers specifically designed with inches on one side, and then you flip it around, and then it's feet divided into 10 so that you can read these markers on the stakes. So in construction in America, there is essentially a pseudo metric system applied to the foot of measurement. We're like halfway to the metric system because our system is so bad, but we're just making it more complicated for ourselves because you have to learn, oh, 6 inches is 0.5 feet. It's like, why don't you just make it 0.5 meters, you idiots? Anyway,
Right. I
I've
prefer
had
the
that.
metric system because it just, when we're driving, it appears that we're driving faster because we're in like a higher, it's like you're going 140 kilometers an hour. I'm like, whoa, I must be going really fast. It's like, no, you're probably just actually.
That's the only exception I'll make. I'll drive miles per hour. I got a ticket going 110 when I was 17 years old, and I'll always hold that up as a point of pride. You'll never take that away from me.
Different metric.
No, never.
Sorry,
Amazing.
officer.
Well, I want to thank our panel members for coming on today to talk about Canada and the anti-immigrant bills that are going through. And I think the next time that we will meet will probably be after Trump is inaugurated. So it will be interesting to see what is cooked up.
We'll all be living in Trump's America, boy.
Ooh, there we go. It will be interesting to see what's cooked up once January 20th rolls around. I mean, January 21st, he's just gonna start. I know he's gonna say something just insane the first day.
Just look back to his last inauguration. What did he say? He basically like quoted that Batman movie or something like, "We finally given it back to the people," or something like that.
Oh man.
At least
we'll see if he smashes the Constitution with a hammer and says, "I'm king of this." That's what I'm anticipating.
Well, thank you everyone for joining me today. And I hope you all stay warm out there this winter and have a great 2025.